Good evening. As you listen to the sound of my voice, you might begin to notice your breath deepening, slowing. Allow me to be your gentle guide tonight, effortlessly leading you through the peaceful landscapes of a time not so long ago, yet a world away. There is nothing to understand, nothing to analyze, only the gentle rhythm of a story waiting to unfold. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave a comment with your city and the time of night where you are. It's always a comfort to know where these stories are finding their homes in the quiet dark. And so, find that gentle darkness in your room, perhaps with the soft blanket pulled a little closer, as we begin our slow drift into tonight's tale. The first thing you notice when you wake is the light, or rather, the lack of it. It's not a deep, restful darkness, but a thin, grey, watery light that filters through your tall window, promising another London day. You don't need to look outside to know what it's like. You can smell it. A faint, ever-present scent of damp earth, coal smoke, and horses. It's the perfume of progress, the smell of the 1850 seconds. You lie still for a moment, listening to the city waking up, the distant clatter of iron minus shod wheels on cobblestones, the rumble of a delivery dray, the faint cry of a vendor selling something you can't quite make out. This is your world, a world painted in a very specific, very limited palette. Pushing back the heavy velvet curtains, you look down onto the street. Everything is brown. The brick of the buildings across the way is a deep, sooty brown. The cobblestones are a slick, muddy brown. The Thames, in the distance, is a sluggish and noble brown. Even the sky, on most days, seems to be a tired, washed-out shade of greyish-brown. It's a city powered by coal and ambition, and both leave a rather distinct, and not entirely pleasant, film on everything. This is the great achievement of the age, the Industrial Revolution, and its byproduct is this constant, gentle rain of soot that coats every surface, muffles every color, and finds its way into the very air you breathe. You watch as a well-dressed couple attempts to cross the street. The road is a treacherous landscape of mud and horse manure, a fragrant reminder of the city's preferred mode of transportation. Suddenly, a small boy darts out from an alleyway, broom in hand, HES a crossing sweeper. For a halfpenny, he frantically clears a narrow path through the muck, allowing the lady to cross without soiling the hem of her expensive, but predictably drab, brown dress. You see it every day. It's a small, transcational moment of grace in the great, dirty machine of the city. Turning back to your room, your eyes scan your own wardrobe. It's a testament to the colors of your era. There are gowns of deep burgundy, somber navy, and, of course, every conceivable shade of brown, from a light fawn to a dark, almost black, chocolate. There's a respectable grey silk, and a cream-colored morning dress, though wearing that one outside feels like a direct challenge to the atmosphere itself. You know it will be smudged with soot before you've even returned for lunch. This muted world is something historians still argue about. Was your life truly this colorless, or is our modern perception simply skewed by what has survived? The photographs from your time are, by their very nature, black and white, draining the life from every scene. And the garments that last long enough to end up in museums are often the sturdy, dark, fuller ones, the things built to endure. Perhaps your world was filled with flushes of brilliant, forgotten color, but they were simply too delicate, too fugitive, to survive the journey through time to us, perhaps. But here, in this moment, looking out your window and into your closet, you feel the weight of this visual monotony. Everything feels heavy, serious, and subdued. It is the color palette of propriety, of industry, of a world that values sturdy reliability over frivolous beauty. You sigh, the quiet, personal rebellion against the tyranny of certain sensibility. You are young, you are wealthy, and you are bored. Bored of the browns, the greys, the endless, predictable cycle of respectable shades. You long for something different, something bright, something that could cut through the London fog like a bolt of lightning, something that would make people stop and stare, a splash of impossible, vibrant life in this city of soot. You don't know it yet. Of course, you can't possibly know. But that color, that impossible, electric, breathtaking color you are dreaming of, has just been invented, and it is waiting for you, waiting to charm you, to captivate you, and to slowly, quietly, begin to poison you. This longing for color isn't just a simple, aesthetic preference, it's a deeper yearning, tied to the very fabric of your existence, because in your world, being seen, and being seen in the right way, is everything. It is your job, your career, your entire purpose, all stitched into the seams of a single day. You live inside what you might call a gilded cage. It is beautiful, it is safe, it is remarkably comfortable, but you are always aware of the bars. The day begins with a ritual of construction. Your lady's maid helps you into your chemise, your drawers, and then, the main event, the corset. It's a formidable piece of engineering, reinforced with hollow bone. And as she pulls the laces tight, you feel your posture instantly corrected. Your back is straight, your waist is cinched, your breathing becomes a little shallower. It's the price of a fashionable figure. Over this goes a cage crinoline, a bell minus-shaped dome of steel hoops that will give your skirts their magnificent, gravity minus-defying shape. Then come the layers of petticoats, and finally, the dress itself. By the time you are fully assembled, you are wearing a significant weight in fabric and steel. Moving requires a certain grace, a learned navigation. Sitting is an art form. Your day is a meticulously choreographed ballet of social obligations. In the afternoon, you will go out in the carriage to pay calls. This is not a casual visit. It is a complex social ritual governed by a set of unwritten, yet unbreakable, rules. You will arrive at the home of an acquaintance, hand your personalized calling card to the butler. Then, depending on the relationship, you might be invited in for a brief 15-minute chat, or you might simply leave your card to signify you have paid your respects. A corner of the card might be folded to indicate you came in person. It is a system of social accounting, and you are its primary bookkeeper. Your life is a constant performance of propriety. You must never be too loud, too clever, or too opinionated. A young woman's greatest virtue is a kind of charming, agreeable blankness, and in this world of hushed tones and veiled intentions, you learn to speak a silent language. This is where the truly peculiar little details of your life emerge. You carry a fan, not just to cool yourself, but as a tool of communication. Holding it to your right cheek in conversation means yes. To your left cheek, no. Tapping it on your chin tells the suitor you are engaged to another. It is a secret, coded dialect that allows you to say all the things that etiquette forbids. A tiny, fluttering rebellion in the palm of your hand. Historians still debate the true nature of this gilded cage. Was the ideal of the angel in the house, the perfect, passive, domestic creature devoted only to her husband and children, a reality, or was it simply a popular fantasy written by men? Many argue that women like you, while constrained, wielded a different kind of power. Running a large household with a staff of servants was like managing a small corporation. Navigating the treacherous waters of the social season and securing a favorable marriage required immense skill, strategy, and social intelligence. Perhaps you were not a prisoner, but a CEO of a very specific, very domestic enterprise. The debate hinges on agency. How much control did you truly have over your own destiny? But from where you stand, in your heavy dress, holding your coded fan, the pressure feels very real, and your most powerful tool in this entire performance. The one thing that speaks before you do is your clothing. Your dress announces your family's wealth, your social standing, your taste, and your availability on the marriage market. A dress that is fashionable, but not flashy, expensive, but not vulgar, beautiful, but not bold. This is the tightrope you must walk. And that is why you are so tired of brown. Brown is safe. Brown is respectable. Brown is invisible. To truly make a mark, to capture the attention of the right person in a crowded ballroom, you need something more. You need a color that can do the talking for you. A color that says you are at the absolute cutting edge of fashion, that your family is prosperous enough to afford the latest novelty, that you are a woman of impeccable, yet daring, taste. You are a product, packaged for consumption on the most exclusive market in the world, and the packaging is everything, as you stare at your reflection. Laced and layered and ready for another day of careful performance. You feel a surge of determination. You will not be another drab brown sparrow in a city of sparrows. You will be something else, something vivid, something unforgettable. You just need to find the right color. Your desire for a new color is not just a personal whim. It's a response to a genuine, widespread problem. The world of dyes in the mid-19th century is a surprisingly murky business. It's a strange and often disappointing mix of ancient traditions and frustrating limitations. Getting a truly vibrant, lasting color onto fabric is a constant, expensive battle against nature itself. Your wardrobe is a museum of these limitations. That deep burgundy dress, it comes from the cochinal beetle, a tiny insect that lives on cacti in Central America. It takes around 70,000 dried and crushed female beetles to produce a single pound of crimson dye. It's a beautiful, rich color, but it's incredibly labor-intensive and, therefore, staggeringly expensive. Only the very wealthy can afford to drape themselves in the remains of so many insects. The blue gown in your closet owes its life to the indigo plant. For centuries, artisans have used a complex fermentation process, often involving stale yarn as a key ingredient, to coax the blue from the leaves. The resulting color is deep and lovely, but it's prone to fading in the sun and can be notoriously uneven. Your own dress has lighter patches at the shoulders and hem, a silent testament to the dye's instability. And then there's yellow. The most common source for yellow is weld, a humble minus-looking plant that grows all over Europe. It produces a pleasant, sunny yellow, but it's a soft color, easily overpowered, trying to create a bright, vivid green by mixing this gentle yellow with a moody, unpredictable indigo blue is a recipe for disappointment. The result is usually a murky, swampy olive or a dull, faint sage. It's the color of a pond, not a jewel. This struggle for green is particularly acute. A truly brilliant emerald green is the holy grail of the dyeing world. Some have tried using buckthorn berries, which produce a color called sap green, but it's notoriously fugitive, meaning it fades almost as soon as you look at it. Historians still puzzle over certain medieval manuscripts where the once lush green foliage in illustrations has faded to a ghostly brown, a chemical ghost of a long vanished color. The chemistry of these early dyes is a field of constant discovery, with researchers using advargy to digitally reconstruct what these colors might have once looked like. The most exotic and high status green comes from a lichen known as orchiol, but it's rare and the color it produces is more of a vibrant mossy shade. Beautiful but not the sharp, clear emerald you dream of. The fundamental problem is that while plants are very good at making green for themselves in their leaves, that chlorophyll is useless as a dye. It breaks down immediately, refusing to bind to fabric. Nature, it seems, is jealously guarding its favorite color. You see the evidence of these struggles every day. You see fabrics with streaky, uneven colors where the dye didn't take properly. You see dresses that have faded to sad, washed out versions of their former selves. You've even experienced the frustration of a new ribbon bleeding its color onto your pristine white collar after a sudden rain shower. Colors are precious, but they are also fickle and unreliable. They are a luxury that constantly reminds you of its own impermanence. And then there's the truly bizarre side of the industry. To make a dye stick to fabric, you need a mordant, a chemical that acts as a bonding agent. The most common mordant is alum, but throughout history, dyers have used a whole host of strange substances. Recipes call for things like ash, dung, and as we've mentioned, vast quantities of aged urine, which was collected daily from households. It's a strange and odorous science, a kind of grubby alchemy that turns beetles and berries into status symbols. So when you stand before your wardrobe, you're not just looking at clothes, you're looking at a collection of expensive, hard-1, and ultimately disappointing compromises. You dream of a green that doesn't look like it was dredged from a riverbed. You want a color that is pure, bright, and, most importantly, stable. A color that doesn't just whisper wealth, but sings it from the rooftops. A color born not of the earth, with all its messiness and unpredictability, but of the new age of science and industry. You want a modern color for a modern world. You imagine a green with the fire of a gemstone, a shade so brilliant it seems to hum with its own inner light. It feels like an impossible dream, but across the channel, in a quiet laboratory, a man has already stumbled upon the answer. The story of your dream color begins not in a grand London fashion house, but 70 years earlier, in a small, cluttered apothecary shop in Sweden. The year is 1775, and the man responsible is a brilliant, and perhaps slightly reckless, pharmaceutical chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele. Scheele is a prodigy. By his early 30s, he has already discovered a host of new elements and chemical compounds, including oxygen. Though a publishing delay meant Joseph Priestley got most of the credit, history is full of these little footnotes of injustice. Scheelism and driven by an insatiable curiosity. I need to understand the fundamental building blocks of the world. And to do that, he has a rather alarming habit. He tastes them. In his quest for knowledge, Scheele routinely tastes and smells the chemicals he works with, including things like hydrosaponic acid, a substance so potent that a single drop could be lethal. It's a miracle the man lived as long as he did. This hands-on, or rather, tongue-on, approach to chemistry is something modern scientists find both horrifying and fascinating. The exact long-term effects of his habit are, of course, a matter of historical speculation, but it's safe to say it probably didn't help his overall health. One day, while experimenting with arsenic, Scheele is trying to create a new pigment. Arsenic is a well-known substance, a soft, grayish metalloid that has been used for centuries, mostly for things people didn't like to talk about at dinner parties. It was the poison of choice for assassins and disgruntled heirs, earning it the nickname inheritance powder. But Scheele is interested in its other properties. He mixes a solution of copper sulfate with a heated solution of arsenious oxide, and something magical happens. A brilliant, vivid, emerald-green powder precipitates out of the solution and settles at the bottom of his beaker. It is a color of astonishing intensity, a pure, vibrant green unlike anything he has ever seen. It makes the dull, flat-based greens of the air look like mud. He has created, entirely by accident, a stable, reproducible, and stunningly beautiful pigment. He calls it, with a notable lack of marketing flair, Scheele's grain. Word of this new pigment begins to spread slowly through the scientific and artistic communities of Europe. At first, it's used primarily by artists. Painters are ecstatic. Finally, they have a green that can capture the true vibrancy of a sunlit leaf or a rolling meadow. It's a revolution on the canvas. But the pigment has its issues. It's chemically unstable when mixed with certain other colors, and it has a nasty habit of blackening over time, especially if exposed to sulfur-containing fumes, like the coal smoke in your London air. This chemical instability is a point of ongoing debate among art historians and conservators when they examine an old painting and see a strangely dark, brownish patch where a green leaf should be. They have to ask, did the artist intend this moody, somber color? Or are we looking at a once brilliant Shields green that has degraded over the decades? It's a chemical mystery. A slow motion act of fading that changes the very meaning of a work of art. For decades, Shields green remains a niche product, used for paints, watercolors, and some wallpapers. But the world is changing. The Industrial Revolution, which fills your city with soot, is also creating a new kind of consumer. People like you, a growing middle class with disposable income and a voracious appetite for novelty, and they are desperate for color. Someone, somewhere, history doesn't record the name of this particular enterprising capitalist, realizes that this brilliant green powder could be used for something far more lucrative than painting landscapes. It could be used to dye fabric. This is the moment everything changes. The process is adapted for textile dyeing, and suddenly, Shields green is poised to leap from the artist's palette into the world of fashion. It is cheap to produce, far cheaper than the laborious natural dyes. It is incredibly vibrant, and it binds to fabric with an intensity that makes indigo and weld look weak. It is the perfect color for the new industrial age. Bright, bold, artificial, and affordable. It is a triumph of modern chemistry over the messiness of nature. A bottle of shimmering, emerald-green powder, born in a Swedish pharmacy from a lump of poison, is about to make its way to a dye house in France or England, where it will be stirred into a vat, ready to transform a simple bolt of cotton into the dress of your dreams. You don't know Carl Scheele's name, and you certainly don't know about his questionable lab habits, but you are about to become his most devoted and most vulnerable customer. And then it arrives. It doesn't appear gradually, but bursts onto the London scene like a new season. One day the parks and ballrooms are a sea of respectable browns and blues, and the next, there are flashes of an impossible green. It's the color of new spring leaves, the flash of a parakeet's wing, the heart of an emerald. It is electric, alive, and utterly intoxicating. The first time you see it, it stops you in your tracks. You are taking a turn in Hyde Park, a daily ritual of seeing and being seen, when a carriage passes. The woman inside is wearing a bonnet trimmed with ribbons of this astonishing new color. Against the grey backdrop of the city, the green seems to vibrate, to emit its own light. It's so vivid it almost hurts to look at. It's not just a color, it's a statement. It's a declaration of modernity. Soon, it is everywhere. Shop windows on Regent Street, which were once filled with somber silks and rose, now feature bolts of this brilliant emerald fabric. Fashion plates in magazines like the English Woman's Domestic magazine show elegant ladies swathed in gowns of the new shade. Their waists impossibly small, their skirts impossibly wide and impossibly green. The advertisements call it Paris green or Schweinfurt green. Slightly improved and even more vibrant versions that have been developed since Scheele's original discovery. But the core ingredient remains the same, arsenic. This new green becomes more than just a color. It becomes a social phenomenon, a full-blown craze. It is the must- of shade of the season, and then the next season, and the season after that. It holds its popularity for decades, an astonishingly long time in the fickle world of fashion. To wear this green is to announce that you are at the peak of style, a woman of taste and means. Not wearing it, conversely, begins to feel like a confession of being out of touch, or worse, out of funds. The craze creates some wonderfully weird side- effects. One of the strangest is the market for green-tinted beetles. The iridescent wing casings of certain jewel beetles have a natural shimmer that perfectly mimics the popular chemical green. Suddenly, these exotic insects, imported from places like India and South America, become the ultimate fashion accessory. Ladies have them incorporated into their gowns, sewn onto headdresses, and even worn as earrings. It is a bizarre and slightly macabre trend, wearing parts of dead insects as jewelry, but it speaks to the depth of the obsession with this specific shade. This universal adoration is something that historians find fascinating. Why this particular color? Some argue it was simply a reaction to the drabness of the industrial city, a collective, desperate thirst for visual excitement. Others suggest it was linked to the Romantic movement's idealization of nature. This new green allowed you to literally wrap yourself in the most vibrant color of the natural world. Even if its source was entirely artificial, the truth is likely a mix of these things. A perfect storm of technology, marketing, and social desire. The academic debate continues. But for you, the reason is much simpler. It is the most beautiful color you have ever seen. It's an infatuation. You see a woman at the opera in a green silk gown and you cannot take your eyes off her. The gas lights of the theater seem to make the color glow, shifting from a bright apple green in the highlights to a deep, mysterious forest green in the shadows of the folds. It's mesmerizing. It makes every other woman in her muted plums and burgundies look old-fashioned, like a faded photograph. The color seems to embody youth and vitality. It is crisp. It is clean. It is hopeful. It doesn't carry the heavy, serious connotations of the darker colors. It feels fresh and daring. You start to see it in your mind's eye when you picture your ideal self, confident, admired, and dazzlingly, unapologetically green. The enchantment is complete. The trap has been set, and it is a beautiful one. You are no longer just bored of brown. You are actively repulsed by it. You have seen the future, and it is a brilliant, shimmering emerald. Your mind is made up. You must have it. You will go to your dressmaker and commission a gown in the new color. It will be the most magnificent dress you have ever owned. And as you make this decision, you feel a thrill of excitement, of anticipation. It is the feeling of getting exactly what you want. You have no idea, not the slightest inkling, that what you want is a dress that will be woven with poison. The bell above the door of Madame Du Bois' dressmaking establishment chimes softly as you enter. The air inside smells of warm linen, beeswax, and the faint, metallic scent of hot irons. This is the inner sanctum of fashion. The place where trends are translated from magazine plates into wearable reality. Madame Du Bois, a formidable French woman who may or may not actually be from France, greets you with a professional, calculating smile. Her job is to sell you not just a dress, but a dream. You are led into a private fitting room, a small, elegant space with a plush velvet settee and a tall, 3-paneled mirror. Bolts of fabric are stacked against one wall. Silks from Lyon, wools from Scotland, cottons from America. But your eyes are fixed on one particular roll, propped in a place of honor near the window. It is the green. In the soft light of the room, the fabric seems to possess a life of its own. It's a tarlatan, a type of fine, open weave muslin that is starched to give it a crisp, airy quality. It's the perfect material for a ball gown. Light enough to create voluminous skirts without weighing you down. And the color is even more spectacular up close. It is a deep, luminous emerald, so saturated with pigment that it seems almost unreal. You walk over and, tentatively, touch it. The surface feels slightly stiff, almost papery, a result of the starch and the sheer density of the dye. It doesn't feel like other fabrics. "Oh, the Paris green," Madame Du Bois says, her voice a low purr of approval. "'Twas chic. Very popular this season, for the Ashworth Ball, perhaps." You nod. Your throat suddenly a little dry. The Ashworth Bowl is the biggest social event of the season, and the thought of making your entrance in a gown of this color sends a flutter of nervous excitement through you. The process begins. Madame Du Bois takes your measurements with brisk, expert hands, calling out numbers to a young seamstress who hovers in the corner, scribbling in a notebook. They measure your waist, your bust, the length of your arms, the slope of your shoulders. A dress like this is not an article of clothing. It is a piece of custom architecture, built around the foundation of your corseted torso. This is a world of incredible, and sometimes bizarre, craftsmanship. A single high-fashion gown can require hundreds of hours of labor, much of it done by young women working by candlelight for pennies an hour. These seamstresses were known for developing a specific set of physical ailments. The constant, repetitive motion of stitching led to deformed fingers and curved spines. Their eyesight often failed by their early 20s from the strain of doing such fine work in blue light. It was a profession known as the dressmaker's toil, a hidden world of exhaustion behind the glittering facade of the ballroom. You discussed the design with Madame Dubois. The neckline will be low, off the shoulder, in the popular Bertha style. The sleeves will be short and puff, and the skirt will be a magnificent dome, requiring at least a dozen yards of the green tarlatan, arranged in 3 deep flounces. To adorn it, you select delicate artificial flowers, little white blossoms with vibrant green leaves that perfectly match the fabric. Historians who study Victorian garments are often amazed by the sheer complexity and detail of their construction. They find evidence of constant alterations. Seams let out, bodices remade, trims changed. A dress was an investment, and it was common to update it from season to season to keep up with the latest fashions. This practice of remaking is a fascinating window into the economic and social realities of your time. It suggests a thriftiness that sits in odd contrast to the era's reputation for lavish consumption. But your gown will be new. Entirely new. You stand in your chemise and corset as the dressmaker's assistants begin to drape and pin the fabric around you, creating a rough silhouette of the final garment. As they work, you can't help but notice a faint, slightly sweet, almost garlicky smell coming from the green fabric. It's a strange, chemical scent, but you dismiss it. It's probably just the dye or the starch. New things often have a smell. You look at your reflection in the triple mirror. Even in this rough, pinned form, the dress is breathtaking. The green is a shock of life against the pale skin of your shoulders. It makes your eyes seem brighter, your hair richer. It is everything you hoped it would be. You will return for several more fittings over the coming weeks, each time seeing the dress become more real, more perfect. You are completely captivated, unaware that the women cutting and stitching the fabric are getting headaches. You don't know that the young girl crafting the delicate floral trim has sores on her fingers where the green dust from the artificial leaves has settled into small cuts. And you certainly don't know that with every fitting, as you stand surrounded by yards of this beautiful material, the fine, invisible green powder is being disturbed, floating in the air, settling on your skin, and dusting the surface of the tea and biscuits you are served. You are simply a young woman, standing in a dream of a dress, breathing in the scent of your own slow poisoning. As you stand there, captivated by the color, you are admiring a masterpiece of chemical deception. The magic behind this impossible green, the secret ingredient that gives it such power, is a compound with a deceptively simple name, copper arsenite. It's a name that neatly combines its 2 key components, each playing a crucial role. The copper provides the brilliant color, while the arsenic acts as a powerful fixative, locking that color onto the fabric with an almost supernatural permanence. Arsenic, on its own, is a brittle, greyish metalloid. It's not something you do look at and think of high fashion, but when it's oxidized and combined with copper, it transforms. This is the new alchemy of the industrial age. Chemists are no longer trying to turn lead into gold. They are turning toxic waste products from the mining industry into things of beauty, and arsenic is plentiful. The tin and copper mines of Devon and Cornwall produce vast quantities of it as a byproduct. It's cheap, it's effective, and it's readily available. The process of dyeing your dress is a brutal one. A worker in a dye house, likely with no protective gear, would mix the green powder, this copper arsenite, with water to create a slurry. The bolt of tarlatan fabric is then submerged in this toxic bath, agitated, and left to soak, allowing the microscopic particles of the pigment to work their way deep into the cotton fibers. When it's pulled out and dried, the fabric is stiff and saturated with the poison. It is less a dyed fabric and more a fabric that is physically coated in a fine layer of green, arsenic minus lace dust. This is the key to its brilliance, and also its danger. Unlike older, natural dyes that form a chemical bond with the fibers, shellac green is a pigment. It sits on the surface of the threads. Think of it like the difference between staining a piece of wood and painting it. The stain soaks it, while the paint creates a distinct layer on top. This layer of green pigment is vibrant, but it's also fragile. With friction, with movement, with the heat of a crowded ballroom, those tiny particles of copper arsenite will flake off, and the sheer amount of arsenic involved is staggering. A single ball gown, like the one being made for you, could contain as much as 900 grains of arsenic. To put that in perspective, a dose of just 4 or 5 grains is considered lethal. Your dress holds enough poison to kill everyone at the Ashworth Ball. And then some. Of course, it's not all going to be ingested at once, but it's a terrifying potential, woven right into the seams of your skirt. One of the most peculiar and chilling details of this whole affair is what happened when these dresses were discarded. Sometimes they were burned, which would release clouds of poisonous, garlic minus scented arsenic gas into the air. Other times, they were repurposed. There are documented cases of old green dresses being used as rags, or even being recycled into the paper minus making process. Historians speculate whether this could have led to traces of arsenic ending up in household paper products. A ghostly, toxic afterlife for a once minus fashionable gown. The paper trail, in this case, might be literally poisonous. The question of awareness is a point of intense historical debate. Did people like you, or even the dressmakers, know that green was poisonous? The answer is complicated. The dangers of arsenic as a poison were universally known. Everyone had heard stories of rats being killed with arsenic powder or lurid tales of criminal poisonings. However, the idea that a solid substance on a piece of clothing could pose a threat was a much more difficult concept to grasp. There was a fundamental lack of understanding about toxicology, about how poisons could be absorbed through the skin or inhaled as dust. Many believed that as long as you didn't actually eat the fabric, you were safe. It's a failure of the imagination, a cognitive dissonance that allowed the trend to flourish. The risk was invisible, abstract, while the social reward of being fashionable was immediate and very, very real. So you stand in the fitting room, surrounded by this beautiful, toxic cloud, and all you can see is the beauty. All you can think about is the impression you will make. The secret ingredient remains a secret to you, not because it's a well-kept conspiracy, but because you simply don't have the scientific framework to understand the danger you are in. You are blinded by the sheer, dazzling brilliance of the color, never suspecting that the magic is just a clever chemical trick, a toxic bargain between copper and arsenic. The decision to commission this dress is about more than just a fleeting desire for a pretty color. It is a carefully calculated investment in the complex economy of social status. In your world, fashion isn't frivolous. It's a fiercely competitive sport. And your green gown is a way of keeping score. The cost of a high-end ball gown is, by any standard, astronomical. A single dress from a top London or Parisian dressmaker could cost anywhere from £10 to £100. To give that some context, a skilled labourer in London might earn around £70 in an entire year. Your one dress, an outfit you might only wear a few times, could cost more than a working class family's annual income. It is an act of conspicuous consumption so extreme it's almost an art form. This is the very essence of what the sociologist Thorstein Veblen would later call conspicuous consumption. The point of the dress isn't just its beauty, but the very clear and public statement it makes about the wealth of the man who paid for it. Your father or, eventually, your husband. A woman's clothing is a walking, talking billboard for her family's financial success. The delicate fabrics that soil easily, the impractical designs that prevent any kind of physical labor, the sheer cost of the garment itself. All of it serves to say, we are so wealthy that our women do not have to work, and we can afford to spend a fortune on things that are beautiful but useless. And the new green dye. for all its cheapness to produce, is marketed as a premium, cutting-edge novelty. Dressmakers charge a premium for it, capitalizing on its immense popularity. So while the arsenic itself may be an industrial byproduct, the finished product, your dress, is a luxury good of the highest order, to where it is to signal that you are not just wealthy, but fashionable, modern, and in the neuro. This era also sees the rise of a wonderfully bizarre and short-lived fashion accessory, the port-tube, or dress elevator. Your crinoline skirts are so wide and so long that they drag on the filthy streets, collecting mud, manure, and all manner of urban grime. The port-tube is a small, cut-side device, often made of ornate silver, that allows you to elegantly hoist your skirt up a few inches when walking. It's a tiny, ingenious piece of engineering designed to solve a problem created by another, much larger piece of engineering. The steel hooped cage you wear under your dress. It's a perfect little symbol of the era's talent for creating complex solutions to self-inflicted problems. The debate among historians on this topic is a lively one. Were women like you victims of a patriarchal system that forced you into these restrictive and impractical clothes? Or were you active participants, using fashion as one of the few tools of power and self-expression available to you? Some scholars argue that by mastering the complex codes of fashion, women created an exclusive sphere of influence and competition that men couldn't fully penetrate. Others maintain that it was all just a more decorative form of oppression, keeping women physically constrained and financially dependent. The truth, as is often the case, is probably somewhere in the messy middle. From your perspective, the pressure is immense. You are acutely aware that when you enter the Ashworth ballroom, you will be judged. Older women, the formidable do-wagers who act as the gatekeepers of society, will scrutinize every detail of your appearance, the quality of your silk, the cut of your bodice, the fashionability of your color. They will assess you as if you were a prize racehorse, and their verdict, whispered behind fans, can make or break a young woman's social career. This is why you are willing to spend the money, to endure the restrictive corset and the cumbersome crinoline. It is the price of admission. It is the uniform of your class and your ambition. Your father, a pragmatic man who made his fortune in shipping, understands this perfectly. He complains about the bills from Madame Dubois, but he pays them without serious protest. He knows he is not just buying a dress. He is buying his daughter a chance at a brilliant marriage, which in turn will solidify the family's position in the treacherous upper echelons of society. So, as the final stitches are put into your gown, you are not thinking about the cost in pounds and shillings. You are thinking about the currency that truly matters: status, admiration, and a secure future. Your green dress is not an expense. It is an investment in your own market value. You are playing a high-minded stakes game, and you are determined to win. You believe the dress is your armor, your greatest asset. You don't yet realize it is also a liability, with a hidden cost that no one has yet begun to calculate. The night of the Ashworth ball arrives, carried on a wave of nervous excitement. For hours, you have been a subject of careful construction. Your hair has been swept up, curled, and ornamented with pearls. Your face has been dusted with the barest whisper of rice powder. And then, the moment you have been waiting for, you step into the dress. Your lady's maid and your mother hold the magnificent green skirt open as you step into its center. They lift the heavy bodice up, and as your maid pulls the laces tight in the back, you feel a familiar sense of compression and uplift. You are now officially wearing the gown. You turn to face the mirror, and for a moment, you forget to breathe. The woman in the reflection is you, but transformed. The green is so vibrant under the gaslight of your dressing room that it seems to pulse with a life of its own. The wide, domed skirt, with its 3 deep flounces, makes your waist look impossibly tiny. The low cut neckline shows off your shoulders and the string of pearls your father gave you for your 18th birthday. The delicate white artificial flowers, with their matching green leaves, are pinned artfully in your hair and along the edges of the skirt's flounces. You look like a fairy tale princess, a wood nymph, a dream. You are a work of art. Arriving at the Ashworth London townhouse is an event in itself. A line of carriages stretches down the block. As you step out onto the red carpet that has been laid over the pavement, you feel the cool night air on your bare shoulders. You can hear the sound of a string orchestra filtering out from the open doors. You make your grand entrance on your father's arm. The ballroom is a cavern of light and sound. Hundreds of candles and gas lamps are reflected in massive, gilt-minus framed mirrors, making the room seem infinite. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, perfume, and hot, crowded humanity. At the far end of the room, a small orchestra plays a waltz, and the room is filled with people. A swirling kaleidoscope of black tailcoats and brightly colored gowns. But as you begin to move through the room, you notice something. A subtle but undeniable shift in attention. Conversations pause, heads turn, fans flutter a little faster. It is the dress. In a sea of pastel pinks, blues, and creams, your gown is a beacon. The emerald green cuts through the visual noise of the room, demanding to be seen. You see the admiration in the eyes of the young men. And, perhaps more importantly, the flicker of envy in the eyes of the other young women. It's a heady, intoxicating feeling. You are the center of attention. Your investment is already paying off. The evening becomes a blur of social triumphs. Your dance card is filled within minutes. You are swept onto the dance floor for waltzes and quadrilles. Your massive green skirt swaying undressing with every step. You feel light, graceful, almost as if you are floating. You make witty, but not too witty, conversation with a string of eligible young men with impressive titles and even more impressive fortunes. You share a glass of champagne with Lord Ashworth himself, who compliments your striking attire. This era had a very specific, and to modern eyes, slightly strange, set of ballroom etiquette rules. For instance, a young, unmarried woman like you should never dance more than 3 times with the same man in one evening, unless you are engaged. To do so would be a scandalous breach of protocol, a public declaration of intimacy that would set tongues wagging for weeks. The ballroom was not just a party. It was a highly regulated marketplace for marriage, and every interaction was governed by these invisible rules. Historians still debate the physical reality of these events. How did hundreds of people, many of them wearing what amounted to steel cages, navigate a crowded room? The image of a graceful, gliding waltz is probably more myth than reality. Surviving accounts describe these balls as hot, stuffy, and incredibly crowded. Moving around was a constant battle of crinoline against crinoline, a gentle, bell-minus-shaped jostling for position. It was probably less like a ballet and more like a very polite, very well-dressed traffic jam. But tonight, you feel none of that. You feel only the triumph. You are a vision in green. You are the envy of the room. You are winning the game. The dress is a success. More successful than you had even dared to imagine. As you twirl in the arms of a handsome young viscount, your green skirt brushing against his black trousers, you feel a sense of perfect, unadulterated joy. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, and you are the most beautiful thing there. You feel alive, vibrant, and utterly invincible, wrapped in your magnificent, shimmering, and fatally toxic cloud. As the night wears on, in the hazy, gas-lit warmth of the ballroom, you begin to notice something strange. At first, it's just a glint of light, a shimmer in the air around you. When you dance, a fine, almost invisible dust seems to lift from the fabric of your skirt. You catch a glimpse of it in a stray moonbeam from a tall window, a faint, sparkling green haze that seems to follow you like a personal aurora. You dismiss it at first. It must be a trick of the light. The way the countless candles and gas jets reflect off the crisp surface of the tarlatan. But then, As you pause to catch your breath between dances, you glance down at your white kid gloves. To your surprise, they are faintly smudged with green, especially on the fingers that have brushed against your skirt. You discreetly try to wipe it away, but it only smears, leaving a pale green stain. Later, you are standing with a small group, sipping a glass of lukewarm lemonade. The young Viscount you danced with earlier is beside you. He is handsome, charming, and seems utterly captivated. But as he talks, he casually brushes his hand against the sleeve of his black tailcoat. And you see it again. A faint dusting of green powder on the dark wall where his arm had been around your waist during the waltz. He doesn't seem to notice. But for you, it's a tiny, jarring detail in an otherwise perfect evening. This shedding of pigment was a well-known, if little understood, characteristic of the arsenic green fabrics. The copper arsenite particles were not truly bonded to the fibers, but were held on more mechanically, often with a starch or binder. As the fabric was subjected to the friction and movement of dancing, this binder would break down, releasing a fine shower of the toxic pigment into the air. Every rustle, every twirl, was a small act of aerosolization. The ballroom, with its heated crowds, becomes the perfect environment for this poison to spread. The air, already thick and stuffy, grows heavy with this invisible, shimmering dust. It settles on the waxed floors, on the furniture, on the refreshments left standing on side tables. It is inhaled by you and by everyone around you. It lands on the exposed skin of shoulders and arms, where it can be absorbed, especially if that skin is warm and slightly damp from the exertion of dancing. One of the more peculiar historical accounts related to this involves a strange, metallic taste. Some women reported a faint, almost garlicky taste in their mouths after wearing a new green dress for an extended period. This is a classic symptom of arsenic ingestion. They were, in effect, tasting the poison as it was absorbed into their system through their lungs and skin. It is a chillingly intimate detail, a sensory ghost of a danger they couldn't name. Historians and toxicologists still debate the precise level of risk posed by this airborne dust in a ballroom setting. Was it enough to cause acute, immediate poisoning in other guests? Probably not in a single evening. The primary danger was to the wearer, who was enveloped in the highest concentration of the dust for the longest period. However, the cumulative effect on a society obsessed with this color is harder to measure. If every major social event of a season was filled with dozens of women shedding arsenic dust, it creates a low-level, chronic exposure for the entire upper class. The debate centers on the dose, the true quantity of arsenic that would become airborne and how much of that would be absorbed by the people in the room. As the ball winds down in the small hours of the morning, you feel a growing sense of fatigue. Your eyes are a little itchy, and your throat feels scratchy and dry. You attribute it to the late hour, the heat of the room. It doesn't occur to you that you have spent the last 5 hours dancing in a cloud of poison, inhaling the very substance that makes your dress so beautiful. On the carriage ride home, you lean your head back against the seat. Exhausted but exhilarated, you look down at your magnificent dress, which now seems a little less crisp, a little less perfect than it did hours ago. In the dim light of the passing street lamps, you can see the fine green dust that has settled into the creases of the fabric. You reach out and brush a finger against one of the flounces, watching the tiny particles glitter on your skin. It's like fairy dust. You think, the magical dust of a perfect, enchanting evening. You smile, close your eyes, and breathe in the lingering, sweet, metallic scent of your success. The journey of your dress did not begin at Madame Dubois's shop. It began in a place you will never see, a place that is the dark, unseen inverse of the glittering ballroom. It began in a grimy, poorly lit workshop, in the hands of a young woman named Marianne. Marianne is perhaps 16 years old, though her slumped posture and the tired look in her eyes make her seem older. She is an artificial florist, one of thousands of young women and children in London who work in this grueling trade. Her job, for 12 to 14 hours a day, is to assemble the delicate floral decorations that adorn the gowns, bonnets, and hair of fashionable ladies like you. Her workstation is a cluttered bench in a crowded, unventilated room. Piles of fabric petals, wires, and velvet leaves surround her, and everywhere there is green. Her hands are permanently stained a sickly, jaundiced green. There is green dust under her fingernails, green dust in the creases of her skin, and a fine green powder coating the front of her drab brown work apron. Her task today is to create the leaves for the little white blossoms that are now pinned to your dress. She takes a piece of fabric, dips it into a gum solution to stiffen it, and then presses it into a heated iron mold to create the delicate veins of a leaf. Then comes the most important and most dangerous part. She takes a brush, dips it into a small bowl of dry, shimmering green powder, and dusts it liberally over the shaped leaf. A quick shake sends the excess powder billowing into the air, and the leaf is done. It is a perfect, vibrant, and utterly toxic imitation of nature. The powder she's using is the same copper arsenite that dyes your dress, but in its most dangerous form. A fine, dry, easily airborne dust. The air in the workshop is thick with it. It coats every surface, and the workers breathe it in with every passing minute. They call it the dust or flour, and they complain that it makes their food taste metallic. Mary Ann suffers from a host of mysterious ailments. Her eyes are constantly red and inflamed. She has a persistent, hacking cough, and her hands are a mess of sores and weeping ulcers where the green dust has worked its way into small cuts and abrasions. The arsenic is a caustic substance, and it literally eats away at her flesh. The doctors of the time have a name for this condition. They call it the ulceration of the hands, and it is rampant among the artificial flower makers. This is a world of extreme, and sometimes bizarre, occupational hazards. For example, the men who made the popular felt top hats of your era suffered from a condition they called the hatter's shakes. The process of turning fur into felt involved using mercury nitrate. The constant exposure to mercury fumes caused severe neurological damage, leading to tremors, slurred speech, and dementia. This real minus-life medical condition is widely believed to be the inspiration for the Mad Hatter character in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. The madness of the Hatter wasn't a fantasy. It was an occupational disease. The plight of the flower makers eventually becomes a public scandal, but not for many years. Social reformers and physicians begin to investigate these workshops, and the reports they produce are horrifying. They describe young girls with their hair turned green from the dust, with sores covering their bodies, and suffering from violent convulsions. Dr. Ive Augustus Granville, a prominent physician, described one young patient who was one of the most pitiable objects I ever saw. Her whole body was a mass of sores. The academic debate here focuses on the economic realities that forced these young women to continue in such a dangerous trade. Were they ignorant of the risks? Not entirely. They knew the dust made them sick. But the alternative was often starvation. The artificial flower trade, frolatories, provided a steady, if meager, income. For a young woman with few options, the choice was between a slow, painful poisoning and a much faster, more certain decline into destitution. It was, in the starkest terms, a choice between different ways of dying. So while you are dancing at the Ashworth Bowl, feeling like a princess, Mary Ann is likely in her small, shared room in a tenement building, coughing up green minor-stinged phlegm. She has probably never been to a ball. She has probably never even seen the inside of a house like the Ashworth's. But her hands, her breath, her very life force, are woven into the beautiful decorations on your dress. You and she are two sides of the same coin, linked by a beautiful, deadly color. You are the consumer. She is the producer. You experience the glamour. She endures the poison in its most concentrated form. Her sickness is the hidden price tag of your beauty. You will never meet her. You will never know her name. but the fine green dust that now faintly covers your gloves and powders your skin is the very same dust that is slowly, inexorably, killing her. In the days and weeks following a ball, the initial euphoria begins to fade, replaced by a subtle, nagging sense of unease. You don't feel quite right. It begins with a persistent headache, a dull throb behind your eyes that even a long afternoon nap can't seem to cure. Your skin, which you have always been proud of, begins to break out in small, itchy rashes, particularly on your shoulders and arms, right where the fabric of your green gown made the most contact. You feel a strange, persistent nausea, a faint queasiness that ruins your appetite. At dinner, you find yourself merely pushing food around your plate. Your mother notices. Of course. She attributes it to the excitement of the social season, the late nights and rich food. She prescribes a tonic, a foul-tasting herbal concoction that does absolutely nothing. Then, your eyes begin to bother you. They are constantly red-rimmed and watery, sensitive to the light. You find yourself squinting in the drawing room, and the fine embroidery you were working on becomes a blurry mess. Reading a novel in the evening, a simple pleasure, becomes a chore that leaves your eyes burning. These are all classic, textbook symptoms of low-level arsenic poisoning. The headache, the skin irritation, a form of contact dermatitis, the nausea, the conjunctivitis. It's a poison that attacks the body on multiple fronts, mimicking a dozen other, more common ailments, and that is precisely why it was so difficult to diagnose. No single symptom was dramatic enough to raise alarm. It was just a collection of vague, disconnected complaints, a fashionable malady. You are not alone in your suffering. You hear whispers from your friends. One complains of a constant nervous stomach. Another has developed a cough that she just can't shake. A third confides in you that her hair seems to be thinning at an alarming rate. Another potential symptom of chronic arsenic exposure. But no one makes the connection. How could they? The illnesses are all so different, so common. They blame the damp London air, the stress of the season, a delicate constitution. This leads to one of the more curious and tragic aspects of the era, the rise of the invalid. For an upper-minded class woman, being perpetually unwell was, in a strange way, fashionable. It was a sign of delicacy and refinement, a proof that you were not a robust, coarse, working-class woman. The image of the pale, languid lady reclining on a chaise lounge, too fragile for the rigors of the world, was a powerful cultural ideal. Doctors, mostly male and often patronizing, would diagnose these women with hysteria or nerves, vague labels for a constellation of symptoms they didn't understand. Historians and medical experts now look back at this phenomenon and ask a chilling question. How much of this fashionable invalidism was actually undiagnosed? Chronic poisoning, from arsenic in the dresses, lead in the face powders, or mercury in the patent medicines that were supposed to cure them? The debate is ongoing because it's impossible to prove definitively. But it raises the haunting possibility that a significant portion of a generation of wealthy women were slowly being poisoned by their own affluent lifestyles, and their suffering was dismissed as a feminine weakness, a psychological failing rather than a physiological one. You visit the family doctor, a kind, elderly man with mutton-chopped whiskers. He listens patiently to your list of complaints. He peers into your inflamed eyes, takes your pulse, and asks you to stick out your tongue. He is reassuring, patting your hand and telling you that you've been overdoing it. He prescribes rest, fresh air as fresh as London air could be, and another vile-tasting tonic. He does not ask about your new dress. It would never occur to him. So you continue to wear the gown. You wear it to the opera, to another, smaller soiree. Each time you wear it, you feel a little worse afterwards. You begin to develop a strange, subconscious aversion to it. When you open your wardrobe, your eyes seem to skip over the brilliant green. You find yourself choosing the old, familiar blues and burgundies instead. The dress, your great triumph, now feels unlucky. You can't explain why. It's a gut feeling, a quiet, instinctual whisper from your body that your conscious mind cannot yet comprehend. The dress that was meant to bring you so much joy is now the source of a creeping, inexplicable dread. The obsession with this brilliant, deadly green is not confined to your wardrobe, like a creeping vine. The color begins to snake its way into every corner of your domestic life. The same arsenic minus-based pigment, so cheap and so vibrant, is used to manufacture a host of other household goods, and its most popular and insidious application is in wallpaper. You stroll into the nursery to check on your younger brother, who has been suffering from a lingering chest cold. The room has recently been redecorated in the height of fashion. The walls are covered in a beautiful, expensive new wallpaper. It features a cheerful pattern of winding ivy and delicate songbirds, all printed in that same, familiar, luminous green. The effect is meant to be calming, to bring the beauty of nature indoors. But this wallpaper is far more dangerous than your dress. The pigment is mixed with a simple gum or casein binder and printed onto the paper. The surface is not sealed or varnished. It is a dry, friable layer of pure copper arsenite, just waiting to be disturbed. Every time the room is dusted, every time a draft from the window rustles the curtains, a fine cloud of arsenic dust is released into the air. When the house is damp, which London houses almost always are, a certain type of mold can grow on the wallpaper paste, in a strange and horrifying quirk of biochemistry. This mold, Scopulareops brevical, actually metabolizes the arsenic pigment. As it feeds on the wallpaper, it releases a volatile, garlic minus smelling arsenic gas called arson. The room is, quite literally, off minus gassing poison. Your little brother, sleeping in his crib, is breathing this in, day and night. His persistent illness, which the doctors have dismissed as a common childhood ailment, is very likely the result of chronic arsenic poisoning from the very walls of his cheerful, natural nursery. This chilling domestic threat is a well-minus documented historical fact. The most famous suspected victim of this very phenomenon was Napoleon Bonaparte. After his death in exile on the island of Crete, samples of his hair were preserved. When tested many decades later, they were found to contain unusually high levels of arsenic. His final home, Longwood House, had been recently decorated with a fashionable green wallpaper. The theory, which is still hotly debated by historians, is that the damp climate of Crete, Helena encouraged the mold to grow, releasing arsenic gas that slowly poisoned the former emperor. Some argue he was deliberately poisoned by his captors. Others maintain his wallpaper was the silent assassin. The Napoleon was poisoned by his wallpaper theory is a perfect example of a historical whodunit that may never be definitively solved. The green pigment finds its way into other unexpected corners of your home. The beautiful, lifelike wax fruit in the bowl on the dining room sideboard is colored with it. The candles you burn in the evening are sometimes dyed green with arsenic, releasing poisonous fumes as they burn. Even the paper boxes that your favorite chocolates come in might be a lovely shade of emerald. There's a particularly strange and unsettling story about a confectioner in London who used the green pigment to color the decorative sugar leaves on his cakes and candies. He sourced the pigment, which he believed to be a harmless food coloring, from a local supplier. The problem was, the supplier wasn't particularly careful about labeling. On one occasion, the confectioner was accidentally sold a batch of pure, undiluted arsenic triazgate, the white powder used as rat poison, which looked very similar to the sugar he used. The resulting green candies poisoned over 200 people and caused several deaths in what became known as the 1858 Bradford sweets poisoning. It was a horrific accident that highlighted the complete lack of regulation in the chemical and food industries. You, of course, know none of this. You look at the green ivy on the nursery walls and see only beauty and good taste. You admire the green candles on the mantelpiece, unaware of what they release into the air. You live in a beautiful, fashionable home, a carefully curated domestic paradise. But the paradise is poisoned. The very air you breathe is tainted. The danger is no longer something you just wear for an evening out. It is something you live with, sleep with, and breathe in every single day. The gilded cage has become a toxic terrarium. The reach of this dazzling green extends beyond fabrics and wallpapers, infiltrating your world in the most intimate and unexpected way, through your mouth. The same chemical brilliance that captivates your eyes used to make all sorts of everyday items more appealing, including the sweets and confections that are a common treat in your social circle. You are at an afternoon tea, a ritual of delicates, sandwiches, scones, and gossip. On the tiered silver tray in the center of the table is a plate of exquisite little cakes. They are miniature works of art, frosted with pale pink icing and decorated with tiny, perfectly formed sugar leaves in a vibrant, jewel-like green. Beside them are boiled sweets in a glass dish, their green stripes so bright they seem almost to glow. Without a second thought, you take one of the small cakes. The sugar leaf is so pretty, a perfect imitation of nature. You pop it into your mouth. It dissolves on your tongue in a wave of pure, uncomplicated sweetness. You also take one of the striped hard candies to save for later. It's a small, innocent pleasure in the middle of a long day. What you don't know is that the confectioner who made these treats, like the one in Bradford, uses shell's grain as a coloring agent. It's cheap, it's potent, and a tiny amount can produce a brilliant color. In an era with virtually no food safety regulations, the line between a pigment for paint and a colorant for food is dangerously blurred. A substance is either a known, fast-acting poison, or it is considered fair game. The concept of a chronic, low-dose toxin that builds up in the body over time is not yet part of the public or scientific consciousness. So you are, quite literally, eating arsenic. The amount in a single sugar leaf or one boiled sweet is minuscule. It's not enough to make you acutely ill, not like the victims of the Bradford poisoning, but it is enough to contribute to the overall toxic load your body is carrying. It is another small, insidious dose, adding to the arsenic you absorb from your dress and inhale from your surroundings. This practice of using toxic mineral pigments in food was horrifully common. Lead, for example, was a huge problem. Red lead was often used to give a vibrant color to cayenne pepper and Gloucester cheese. White lead was sometimes used to whiten bread made from poor-quality flour. And then there's a particularly bizarre substance known as Prussian blue. It was a synthetic pigment that, while not as toxic as arsenic or lead, was certainly not meant for human consumption. Yet, it was frequently used by merchants to give a fresh, bluish-green tint to second-hand tea leaves that they were trying to pass off as new. The British public, it seems, was drinking paint-tinted tea for decades. The debate among food historians and toxicologists on this issue is fascinating. How widespread was this contamination? And what was its cumulative effect on public health? Some argue that while these practices were shocking, the actual doses were often too small to cause significant harm beyond occasional stomach upset. Others contend that this constant, low-level exposure to a cocktail of heavy metals and toxins contributed to a wide range of chronic health problems that were simply not understood at the time. It's a debate about the hidden environmental factors that shape the health of an entire population. You, sitting in the drawing room, have no such concerns. You are worried about securing a good marriage, about the latest piece of gossip, about whether the color of your new bonnet truly complements your eyes. The idea that the food on your plate could be actively harming you is an alien one. You trust in the tidy, well-ordered world around you. You trust the shopkeeper, the confectioner, the cook. Food is nourishment, pleasure, a social lubricant. It is not supposed to be a vehicle for poison. Later that evening, you unwrap the small, green-striped boiled sweet you saved. You hold it up to the lamplight, admiring the clarity of the color, the perfect twist of the stripes. It looks so clean, so pure, so harmless. You put it in your mouth and enjoy the simple, sugary taste. entirely unaware that you are consuming the very same substance used to kill rats, to decorate the walls of your home, and to dye the beautiful green dress hanging silently in your wardrobe. It is a perfect, deadly circle of consumption. Amidst the swirl of social engagements and the quiet hum of domestic life, a new character enters our story. He is not a fashionable lord or a wealthy industrialist, but a quiet, observant man with a sharp mind and a growing sense of unease. He is a physician, and he is beginning to see a pattern. Let's call him Jive. Alistair Finch. He has a small but respectable practice in a fashionable part of London. His patients are women like you, the wives and daughters of the city's elite, and for the past few years, he has been treating a growing number of them for a remarkably similar set of vague and frustrating symptoms: headaches, nausea, skin rashes, chronic fatigue, conjunctivitis. He has been diagnosing them with nervous exhaustion or gastric complaints. The standard, catch minus all labels of the day. But the treatments don't seem to work. The tonics, the prescribed rest, the seaside holidays, they provide only temporary relief. The women always return, just as pale, just as tired. Dr. Finch is a man of the new scientific age. He reads the latest medical journals, including The Lancet, and he believes in observation and evidence. And as he sits in his study one evening, reviewing his patient files, he starts to connect the dots. He realizes that the majority of the women suffering from this fashionable malady have one thing in common. They are all remarkably fashionable. They are the leaders of style. The women who are always the first to adopt the latest trends. His mind flashes back through a series of recent consultations. He remembers the rational Lady Carrington's shoulders, perfectly tracing the outline of her ball gown's neckline. He recalls the persistent eye inflammation of Miss Devereux, who had recently purchased a set of vibrant green curtains for her drawing room. And he thinks of you, and the way your symptoms seemed to begin right after your triumphant appearance at the Ashworth Ball. And in all these cases, he remembers one specific, vivid detail: green, a green dress, green curtains, green ribbons. It's a hunch, a fragile thread of a theory that goes against all conventional medical wisdom. The idea that an article of clothing or a piece of furniture could be the source of a systemic illness is radical, even eccentric. But Dr. Finch is methodical. He begins to ask new questions during his consultations. He inquires about recent purchases, about ray decorations, about the colors of his patients' favorite outfits. At first, the women are bemused by this line of questioning. What could the color of their wallpaper possibly have to do with their stomach problems? This period in medical history is a fascinating turning point. The old humoral theory of medicine, which blamed illness on an imbalance of bodily fluids, was slowly giving way to the new germ theory and an understanding of environmental toxins. But it was a slow and often contentious process. Doctors who proposed new, unconventional ideas were often ridiculed by the established medical community. The very idea of an invisible cause of disease, whether it was a microbe or a chemical, was difficult for many to accept. Dr. Finch's quiet investigation puts him right on the cusp of this change. He is moving from treating symptoms to searching for a root cause, a foundational shift in medical practice. One of the more interesting and slightly macabre tools at his disposal is the new science of toxicology, particularly the Marsh test. Developed in the 1832s by a chemist named James Marsh, it was the first reliable and sensitive chemical test that could prove the presence of arsenic in a sample, a piece of food, a stomach content, or a scrap of fabric. This test revolutionized forensic science, making it much harder to get away with arsenic poisoning. It's this kind of new, rigorous scientific method that is beginning to empower doctors like Drive, Finch. The debate among medical historians is whether the connection was first made by a single, brilliant physician, or if it was a slow, dawning realization among many doctors at once. There isn't one single eureka moment in the historical record. Instead, It seems to be a case of scattered reports and quiet suspicions gradually building into a body of evidence. Doctors in London, Paris, and Berlin were all observing the same strange illnesses among their wealthy, fashionable patients. Dr. Finch, our fictional embodiment of this movement, feels a growing sense of conviction, but also a sense of professional dread. To publicly accuse the most popular fashion trend of the day of being poisonous would be an attack on a massive, profitable industry. He would be mocked by his colleagues, dismissed as a crank. He needs more than a hunch. He needs proof. He thinks of your green dress. He remembers you describing it with such pride. He makes a note in his file. He decides he will try to acquire a small sample of this fashionable new fabric, this Paris green that everyone is wearing. He will take it to a chemist he knows at the university. He will have it tested. The thought is both exciting and terrifying. He feels he is on the verge of a great and terrible discovery. A secret hiding in plain sight, a poison disguised as beauty. Well, Dr. Finch begins his quiet, methodical investigation. A much louder and more chaotic debate is starting to brew in the public sphere. The idea that this beautiful green color might be dangerous is no longer just a whispered suspicion in a doctor's study. It is becoming a topic of heated, and often contradictory, public discussion. The conversation plays out in the pages of newspapers and journals, the battleground of Victorian public opinion. On one side are the doctors and early public health reformers. They write letters to the editor of the Times and articles in medical journals like The Lancet, describing cases of mysterious illnesses in women and children, and pointing a finger of suspicion at the fashionable green dyes. They publish accounts of the horrific conditions in the artificial flower workshops, describing in detail the sores, the convulsions, and the deaths of the young workers. They are voices of alarm, trying to wake the public up to a hidden danger. On the other side are the manufacturers, the merchants, and a surprising number of chemists and doctors with ties to the industry. They launch a powerful counter-minus attack. They write their own letters and articles, dismissing the concerns as alarmist nonsense and unscientific hysteria. They argue that the amount of arsenic in the fabrics is too small to cause any harm. A common and dangerously misleading argument is that the arsenic is fixed in the fabric and cannot possibly escape. You would have to burn the dress and inhale the fumes. They claim to be at any risk. This brings up a fascinating undercurring theme in history. The denial is implacable. The arguments and tactics used by the defenders of arsenic green are strikingly similar to those used much later by industries defending asbestos, leaded gasoline, or tobacco. They question the science, attack the credibility of the researchers, insist on an impossible standard of absolute proof, and emphasize the economic benefits of their product. It is a battle between public health and corporate profit, and the script seems to be timeless. One of the most bizarre arguments made at the time was that the sickness was not caused by the arsenic itself, but by the effluvia of the wearers. In other words, they claimed the women were getting sick because of their own unwholesomeness, feminine vapors being trapped by the heavy fabrics. It was a classic case of victim-blaming, rooted in the medical misogyny of the era, and it neatly shifted the focus away from the chemical poison and onto the supposed frailties of the female body. This public debate is a confusing mess for the average person like you. One week you might read a terrifying article in a magazine about a child who fell ill after sleeping in a green-contained room. The next week, you'll see a letter in the newspaper from a respected professor of chemistry, assuring the public that arsenic wallpapers are perfectly safe as long as you don't lick them. Who are you to believe? The scary stories sound like sensationalism. The reassurances from the men of science sound so reassuring. This is a point of considerable debate among historians of science and media. How effective was this industry pushback? Did it genuinely confuse the public? Or did people have a nagging sense of the danger but choose to ignore it for the sake of fashion? It's the classic question of knowledge versus behavior. Knowing something is dangerous and acting on that knowledge are two very different things. Many historians argue that the public was caught in a state of motivated ignorance. They didn't want to believe they're beautiful. expensive possessions were harming them, so they chose to believe the comforting voices of the industry over the alarming ones of the reformers. You are caught in the middle of this information war. You hear the whispers, the rumors. A friend of your mother's has decided to have all the green wallpaper stripped from her house. A messy and expensive undertaking. You overhear two older women at a tea party discussing an article they read. Their voices low and concerned. But then you see dozens of women at the opera, looking healthy and vibrant in their emerald gowns. You see advertisements in the magazines for the latest improved Paris green fabrics. It's all too easy to dismiss the warnings. The danger feels abstract, distant, while the social pressure to be fashionable is immediate and very real. To get rid of your dress, to tear down your wallpaper, it would be a radical, eccentric, and very expensive act of defiance against the prevailing culture. It's so much easier, so much more comfortable, to believe that it's all just a fuss about nothing. So you do. You push the nagging doubts to the back of your mind. You tell yourself that if it were really dangerous, the government would do something about it. The Queen wouldn't allow it. It is a comforting, and utterly false, assumption. The sickness debate rages on. A war of words fought in print, while the real casualties continue to mount in silence. The tipping point in this confusing public debate comes not from a dry scientific paper or a government report, but from a place of public ridicule and satire. In 1858, the popular satirical magazine Punch publishes a cartoon that will become one of the most famous and influential images in the entire arsenic green saga. The cartoon is titled The Arsenic Waltz, or The New Dance of Death. It is a macabre and wickedly clever piece of social commentary. It depicts a well-dressed skeleton, representing death, dancing with a beautiful young woman in a fashionable ball gown. The woman is wearing a headdress of leaves and flowers, and her gown is clearly meant to be the infamous green. As they waltz, the skeleton whispers flirtatious lie in her ear, and a fine powder can be seen dusting off her dress onto his bony shoulders. The caption below reads, "The new foliage for ladies' head-dresses is made of a deadly poison." You see the cartoon when your father brings the magazine home. At first, you are shocked, even a little offended. It seems grotesque, a vulgar joke at the expense of fashionable women. But you can't look away. The image is powerful, and it is unforgettable. It takes the abstract, scientific debate about toxicology in parts minus per minus million and translates it into a simple, visceral, and terrifying idea. You are dancing with death. The cartoon is an instant sensation. It is talked about in drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs all over London. It does what dozens of scientific articles failed to do. It makes the danger feel real, immediate, and personal. It connects the beautiful green dress directly to the skull and crossbones. Certainly, in this case, proves to be a more effective weapon than science. This use of satire as a tool for public health campaigning is a fascinating historical footnote. In an era with no television, radio, or internet, a widely circulated cartoon in a popular magazine was one of the most powerful forms of mass media. The artists at Punch were masters of this. They had previously used their cartoons to campaign against the horrific sanitation conditions in London and the adulteration of food. They understood that a powerful image could cut through the noise and complacency in a way that mere words could not. The Arsenic Waltz is part of a broader artistic and literary fascination with the theme of beauty being intertwined with death and decay. The Romantic and Gothic movements were full of this imagery. Think of John Keats's poem L'aube elle dame sans merci, the beautiful, merciless lady who enchants and destroys men, or Edgar Allan Poe's tales of beautiful women who are either dead or dying. There was a cultural obsession with the idea of a fatal allure, a beauty so potent it becomes dangerous. The arsenic green dress fits perfectly into this narrative. It is the literal, real-world embodiment of a popular Gothic trope. Historians debate the true impact of this single cartoon. Did it really change public opinion overnight? Or was it simply reflecting a concern that was already widespread? It's a chicken and egg argument. Some scholars argue that Punch was merely capitalizing on a pre-minus existing anxiety for commercial gain. Others contend that the cartoon was genuinely catalytic, a tipping point that forced the issue into the mainstream and made it impossible to ignore. The truth is likely that it was both, a reflection and an accelerant of public concern. For you, the effect is profound. The image of the waltzing skeleton is burned into your mind. The next time you open your wardrobe, you see your beautiful green gown. And for the first time, you don't see the triumph of the Ashworth ball. You see the grinning skull from the cartoon. The dress suddenly looks menacing, predatory. The beautiful, vibrant green now seems sickly and unnatural. The humor, the horror, and the sheer, undeniable cleverness of the cartoon have broken the spell. The enchantment is shattered. You can no longer convince yourself that the warnings are just hysteria. The joke has made the danger impossible to -1-see. You can't wear the dress again. The thought of putting it on, of feeling it against your skin, now fills you with a sense of revulsion. The most beautiful dress in the world has become a shroud in your closet. The Punch cartoon opens a floodgate. Public sentiment, now fully aroused, begins to demand answers, not just reassurances. The time for polite debate is over. The time for proof has arrived. And so, the fabric is finally put under the glass. Dr. Finch, feeling emboldened by the shift in public opinion, proceeds with his plan. He manages to acquire a small swatch of the green towelette and fabric, perhaps by purchasing a yard of it himself, under the guise of a gift for his wife. He takes the vibrant green sample to his acquaintance at the university, a chemist named Dr. Hoffman, a real historical figure and one of the leading chemists of the day. You can picture the scene, a laboratory filled with glass beakers, retorts, and the acrid smell of chemicals. It is the temple of the new science. Dr. Hoffman, a serious man with a thick German accent, examines the fabric. He places a small piece of it into a test tube and adds a few drops of hydrochloric acid. Then, he heats the tube gently over a Bunsen burner. The brilliant green color dissolves, and the solution gives off a faint, garlicky smelling gas, the telltale sign of arsenic. But he needs definitive proof. He employs the Marsh test, the gold standard for arsenic detection. The test is an ingenious piece of chemical theater. He takes the solution made from the fabric and introduces it into a flask where hydrogen gas is being generated. The gas mixture is then passed through a heated glass tube. If arsenic is present, it decomposes and the heat deposits on the cool part of the tube, forming a silvery black, mirror-like stain. Dr. Hoffman performs the test. As he on Dr. Finch watch, the inside of the glass begins to darken. A faint, silvery film appears, and then grows, becoming a distinct, metallic, and utterly damning mirror. It is the arsenic mirror. The proof is undeniable, irrefutable. The fabric is saturated with arsenic. Similar tests are being conducted across London and Europe. The Lancet commissions its own investigation. The Ladies' Sanitary Association, a pioneering group of female public health reformers, sends samples of wallpaper and artificial leaves to be analyzed. The results all come back the same, arsenic, and not just trace amounts. The quantities are shocking. Dr. Hoffman calculates that a single ball gown contains enough arsenic to poison 20 people. He finds that a square foot of fashionable green wallpaper can contain up to 60 grains of arsenic. One of the most curious and little known details to emerge from these investigations is the taste test controversy. In one report, a chemist describes how he confirmed the presence of arsenic by the taste of the fabric, noting its sweetish quality. This reflects the same reckless, hands-on approach to chemistry that Courtauld practiced decades earlier. The idea of a scientist deliberately tasting a suspected poison is horrifying to a modern mind, but it was a surprisingly common, if ill-advised, diagnostic to love the era. The scientific community, which had been so divided, now begins to consolidate its opinion, faced with the irrefutable chemical evidence. the industry's defenders fall silent. It becomes impossible to argue that the substance isn't present, or that it's harmless. The debate now shifts, focusing on the mechanism of poisoning. How, exactly, does the arsenic get from the fabric into the person? Is it through skin absorption, inhalation of dust? The new field of toxicology is being born out of this very crisis. As scientists grapple with the complexities of how environmental toxins affect the human body, this debate about absorption pathways continues for years, a scientific puzzle that emerges from a fashion craze. The findings are published, not just in obscure scientific journals, but in the mainstream press. Newspapers that had previously printed the industry's reassurances now print the horrifying results of the chemical analyzers. The numbers are stark and easy to understand. Your dress contains poison. Your wallpaper contains poison. The leaves in your hair contain poison. For you, this scientific confirmation is the final nail in the coffin of your infatuation, your vague feelings of illness, your instinctive aversion to the dress, the satirical horror of the Punch cartoon. It all clicks into place. It's not your imagination. It's not a fashionable malady or a case of nerves. You have been sickened by your dress. You have been living in a poisoned house. The beautiful lie has been stripped bare by the ugly, chemical truth. The shimmering green dust is not fairy dust. It is a finely powdered, slow minus-acting poison, and you have been breathing it, wearing it, living with it. All this time, a new and unfamiliar feeling settles over you. A quiet, creeping fear. It changes the way you see your own home, the way you feel in your own clothes. The world, which once felt so safe and predictable, now seems to hold hidden threats in its most beautiful corners. You walk to your wardrobe, the heavy wooden doors swinging open with a soft groan. There it is, the green dress. It hangs among the somber blues and browns like an exotic, poisonous snake. The color, which once seemed so vibrant and full of life, now looks lurid, artificial, menacing. You can almost see the fine green dust shimmering in the dim light of the room, a toxic aura around the garment. You think back to the night of the ball, the compliments, the dancing, the triumph you felt. It all feels tainted now, like a happy memory that has been corrupted. You remember the scratchy throat, the itchy eyes, the fatigue you felt on the carriage ride home. You had dismissed it all as the consequence of a late night. Now you understand. Your body was trying to warn you. It was reacting, fighting back against the poison you had so cheerfully wrapped it in. The dress is no longer a symbol of your success. It is an emblem of your own foolishness, your own vulnerability. You feel a strange mix of anger and embarrassment. How could you have been so blind? How could you have coveted something so dangerous, so destructive? This moment of realization is a private, domestic drama that is being repeated in fashionable homes all across the country. Women are looking at their wardrobes with a new, suspicious eye. A quiet panic begins to take hold. What is to be done with these beautiful, expensive, and now terrifying objects? You can't simply throw it away. A dress of this value is not a disposable item. And besides, where would you throw it? Leaving it out with the household rubbish seems irresponsible, almost malicious. Burning it, as you've read, would release a plume of toxic gas. You can't, in good conscience, sell it or give it away to a less fortunate relation or a servant. To do so would feel like a deliberate act of poisoning. So, the dress hangs in your wardrobe, in a state of limbo. It is too beautiful to destroy, but too dangerous to wear. It becomes a silent, green monument to a dead fashion. This is how many of these dresses survived to the present day. They were not worn out or discarded, but were carefully packed away in trunks and stored in attics, their poisonous potential sealed away like a genie in a bottle. The question of what to do with these toxic garments is a matter of some debate for historians and museum curators. When a museum acquires an arsenic dress, they can't simply put it on a mannequin. It must be handled with gloves and masks. It is stored in a special, climate-controlled environment, often sealed in a protective bag to contain the shedding dust. The fabric cannot be cleaned or repaired in the usual ways, as this would risk releasing more of the pigment. They are artifacts that are still actively dangerous, more than a century and a half after their creation. This period also saw the rise of a very strange and specific piece of furniture, the poison cabinet. In many upper- and middle-class homes, common household substances like arsenic for rats, strychnine for pests, and opium for medicinal use were kept in the home. After a few high-profile accidental poisonings of children, a trend emerged for small, often ornate, and always locked cabinets, sometimes even shaped like a skull or featuring other macabre designs. To store these dangerous substances, it's a fascinating material artifact of the era's growing, yet incomplete, awareness of the chemical dangers lurking in the domestic sphere. You decide you must get the dress out of your room. You call your lady's maid and instruct her, with a firmness that surprises you both, to carefully fold the gown, wrap it in heavy linen sheets, and place it in an old trunk in the attic. The maid is confused but obedient. As you watch her handle the rustling green fabric, you feel a pang of guilt, a worry for her safety, but you don't know how to explain the strange, sudden urgency of your request. Later that day, you stand in the now-safe space of your bedroom. The wardrobe seems emptier, less exciting, but the air feels cleaner. You feel safer. The headache that has been your near-constant companion for weeks seems to have finally receded. You have made a choice. You have chosen health over fashion, safety over status. It is a small, personal, and profoundly significant act of rebellion. You have banished the poison from your life. The next, and much bigger, challenge will be banishing it from your home. Your personal decision to reject the dangerous green is soon echoed by a much more powerful and influential figure. The ripple of change you started in your own wardrobe becomes a wave, and that wave reaches all the way to the top of society, to the woman whose taste and choices dictate the style of the entire nation, Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria's relationship with fashion is a complex and fascinating one. In her youth, she was a vibrant and fashionable monarch. But after the death of her beloved husband, Prince Albert, in 1861, she famously plunged into a state of perpetual mourning. For the rest of her long reign, she wore almost exclusively black, becoming the iconic, somber widow of Windsor. Her personal choice to adopt permanent mourning attire has a profound and lasting impact on the fashion of the era. Black, which was once reserved for funerals, becomes a respectable, and even fashionable, color for everyday wear. The etiquette of mourning becomes incredibly elaborate and rigid, with prescribed lengths of time and specific fabrics for different stages of grief. This cult of mourning, as it's now known, casts a long, dark shadow over the latter half of the century. But even before Albert's death, as the scandal around arsenic green reaches its peak, the Queen and the royal court make a deliberate and public shift in their color preferences. You begin to see reports on the society pages of the newspapers. At a state reception, the Queen is noted to be wearing a gown of a deep, royal purple. The young princesses are seen at a garden party dressed in shades of soft pink and blue. There is no public decree, no official announcement. That doesn't need to be. The message is sent through the subtle but powerful language of fashion. The royal family is no longer wearing the arsenic green. This royal snub is a death blow to the trend. If the color is no longer fit for the Queen, it is no longer fit for anyone aspiring to be respectable. The very thing that made the green so desirable, its status as the height of fashion, is now gone. It is suddenly, irrevocably, out of style. The Queen's influence extends to a peculiar and little-known area of court life. The presentation of debutantes. Each year, young aristocratic women like you must be formally presented at court to the monarch. This is their official entry into high society in the marriage market. The rules for what a debutante can wear are incredibly strict and have been for generations. The dress must be white. It must have a low neckline and short sleeves. and it must have a train of a specific length. It is a highly ritualized uniform. After the arsenic scandal, it is said that an unofficial word went out. Any green in the headdresses or trimmings of the debutantes would be looked upon with extreme disfavor. The poison was, in effect, banished from the royal presence. Historians debate the Queen's personal motives in this. Was she a secret public health advocate, using her influence to protect her subjects from a known poison? Or was it a more pragmatic decision, a way to distance the royal family from a growing scandal and appear tastefully conservative? Some scholars argue that Prince Albert, who had a keen interest in science and industry, was likely aware of the dangers and may have advised her. Others suggest it was simply a matter of becoming associated with death and scandal, making it distasteful to the Queen's famously proper sensibilities. The exact reason remains a matter of speculation. A private conversation in the palace that history did not record. The effect, however, is immediate and undeniable. Madame du Bois, your dressmaker, quietly removes the bolt of green tarlatan from its place of honor in her showroom. Builder, safer colors take its place. A new synthetic dye has just been invented, a brilliant purple shade called mauve, and it is quickly becoming the new color of the moment. It is the world's first mass-produced aniline dye, a triumph of organic chemistry, and it carries with it none of the toxic baggage of the arsenic green. You feel a sense of relief, of vindication. Your private decision is now the public consensus. The beautiful, deadly green that had held your world in its thrall for so long is finally losing its power. The waltzing skeleton from the Punch cartoon can finally recede into the shadows. A new era of color is dawning, one born not from poisonous minerals, but from the new and exciting science of synthetic chemistry. The reign of the killer green is over. The fall of arsenic green creates a vacuum in the world of color, and science, spared by both commercial opportunity and a newfound sense of public responsibility, rushes to fill it. The era of crushing beetles and fermenting plants is officially over. The future of fashion, you now understand, will be born in a test tube. The first sign of this new future is the color that replaces green as the shade of the moment. Note, its discovery, much less, is a complete accident. In 1856, an 18-year-old English chemist named William Henry Perkin is trying to synthesize quinine, the anti-malaria drug, from Courtauld, a sticky, black industrial waste product. His experiment is a failure. Instead of quinine, he ends up with a beaker full of a dark, sludgy mess. Most chemists would have thrown it away. But Perkin, in a moment of inspired curiosity, tries to clean the beaker with alcohol. As he does, the sludge dissolves into a stunningly beautiful, intense purple solution. He realizes he has stumbled upon something completely new, a powerful, stable, and entirely artificial purple dye. He calls his creation Mauve, and it will change the world. Perkin is not just a brilliant chemist, he is also a savvy entrepreneur. He patents his discovery and opens a factory to produce mauve dye on an industrial scale. It is an immediate, runaway success. The color is embraced by Queen Victoria and Empress Eugenie of France, and soon, all of London is awash in what the press dubs mauve measles. It is the new, fashionable, and, most importantly, non-toxic color. This breakthrough with mauve opens the floodgates. A dye-rush begins, a frantic period of chemical discovery as chemists all over Europe race to create new colors from the cheap and plentiful Courtauld. It is a wildly exciting time in the chemical industry. New, vibrant colors are being invented almost every month. Bright magenta, dazzling fuchsia, a whole family of rich aniline blacks and blues. One of the great challenges is creating a safe and stable synthetic green to replace the now disgraced arsenic-based pigments. For years, chemists struggle. Early attempts are disappointing, producing dull, muddy shades or colors that fade quickly in the light. This quest for a good synthetic green becomes a kind of holy grail for industrial chemists of the late 19th century. A particularly strange and little minus known chapter in this story is the absinthe green craze of the 1892. The popular and notoriously potent alcoholic drink had a distinctive cloudy, yellowish minus green color. This shade became incredibly fashionable, especially in artistic and bohemian circles. Dyers tried to replicate it, leading to a new generation of green dyes. While they were a vast improvement over the arsenic greens, some of them still contained other toxic elements, like copper. The association of the color green with poison and danger lingered in the public imagination for a long time. Historians of science and technology still debate the true nature of this aniline dye revolution. Was it a purely heroic story of scientific progress leading to a safer, more colorful world, or did it have its own dark side? The production of these new synthetic dyes created its own set of environmental problems. The factories pumped chemical waste into rivers, and the workers were exposed to a new host of potentially carcinogenic compounds. The shift from a natural poison to a synthetic one was not a simple, clean break into a perfectly safe future. It was the beginning of a new and complex relationship between industry, chemistry, and public health. For you, this explosion of new colors is a source of wonder and delight. The shop windows on Regent Street, which had so recently been dominated by a single, notorious shade of green, now bloom with a whole rainbow of new possibilities. You see dresses in shades you never could have imagined. Rich violets, fiery oranges, electric blues. You commission a new gown from Madame Dubois, this time in a beautiful, deep magenta. The fabric is soft and supple, with none of the strange stiffness of the green tarlatan. It has no raw, chemical smell. You can wear it with a sense of freedom and confidence that was impossible with the green dress. You can dance all night without worrying about a strange dust or a lingering headache. The world feels brighter, safer, more full of promise. The dark shadow of the arsenic green has lifted, replaced by a vibrant, synthetic dawn. You have survived the killer fashion, and you have emerged into a new, more colorful age. You don't know it, but the change is not yet complete. The most dangerous source of the poison is not in your wardrobe, but on the very walls of your home. The fear, once ignited, does not simply vanish with the passing of a fashion trend. The public is now keenly aware that the danger lurks not just in their clothes, but in their homes. A new, quiet, and deeply personal panic begins to set in, centered on the cheerful green wallpaper that adorns so many nurseries, drawing rooms, and bedrooms across the nation. You stand at the door of your younger brother's nursery. The room, which once seemed so bright and charming, now feels like a trap. The cheerful pattern of ivy and songbirds on the walls seems to mock you. Every leaf, every blade of grass in the design, is a tiny repository of poison. You think of your brother's persistent cough, his pale cheeks. The connection is no longer a vague suspicion. It is a certainty that settles in your stomach like a cold stone. You speak to your parents. At first, your father is skeptical, ripping out perfectly good, expensive wallpaper because of some sensationalist newspaper articles seems like a drastic and wasteful overreaction. It is an argument happening in households everywhere. The cost and inconvenience of removing the wallpaper are weighed against a threat that is still, for many, difficult to see or fully believe. But the evidence continues to mount. Doctors are now explicitly advising their patients to remove any green wallpaper from their homes. Stories circulate, whispered at tea parties and dinner tables, of children who miraculously recovered from chronic illnesses just weeks after their green-stone nurseries were redecorated. The fear of a poisoned home, a poisoned family, begins to outweigh the fear of expense and inconvenience. Your mother, her protective instincts now fully engaged, convinces your father. The decision is made. The wallpaper must go. The process is a domestic upheaval. Furniture is moved to the center of the rooms and covered in dust sheets. Workmen are hired, and they arrive with buckets and wide, flat scrapers. They begin the slow, arduous task of peeling back the layers of fashionable poison. It is a messy, difficult job. The old wallpaper, stuck on with a strong, flour-based paste, does not come off easily. The workmen moisten it with water, which has the unfortunate side effect of reactivating the arsenic, creating a damp, toxic pulp. They scrape and pull, and the paper comes off in ragged strips, revealing the bare plaster underneath. A fine, greenish dust fills the air, a visible manifestation of the invisible threat. You are wise enough to keep your brother out of the house for the duration of the work. This nationwide scraping down is a fascinating and documented chapter of social history. There are no official records of how many homes were stripped of their green wallpaper, but the anecdotal evidence suggests it was a widespread phenomenon, at least among the literate middle and upper classes who were reading the warnings in the press. It represents a massive, collective act of domestic detoxification, a grassroots public health movement driven by fear and new scientific knowledge. One of the strangest relics of this era is the emergence of arsenic-free wallpaper. Manufacturers, seeing the shift in public sentiment, quickly begin to advertise their new products with this selling point. They print guarantees on the edges of the wallpaper rolls, certifying that they are free from arsenical coloring. This is one of the earliest examples of health and safety marketing, using the fear of a competitor's toxic product to sell your own. The debate among historians is how genuine these claims were. In an unregulated industry, it's possible that some arsenic-free papers still contain trace amounts of the poison, or rather, not minus yet minus identified toxins. As the last of the green paper is scraped from the walls of your home, you feel a profound sense of relief, as if a fever has broken. The rooms look bare and scarred, but they feel safe. The air itself seems cleaner, lighter. Your family chooses a new wallpaper, a pleasant, inoffensive cream-colored floral, guaranteed by the manufacturer to be free of arsenic. A few weeks later, a small miracle occurs. Your brother's cough begins to disappear. The color returns to his cheeks. He is more energetic. His appetite improves. The doctor is amazed at his sudden recovery. But you know it was a miracle. It was an act of removal. An act of listening to the warnings and choosing to believe them. You have scrubbed the poison not just from your wardrobe, but from the very heart of your home. You have made your gilded cage safe again. Years pass. The world changes, and the memory of the great arsenic green scare begins to fade into the past, becoming just another curious, forgotten story. You grow older. You marry. You have children of your own. And you tell them the strange tale of the beautiful green dress you once owned. The dress that was secretly woven with poison. It sounds like a fairy tale, a gothic fable. It's hard for them, living in a world of safe, synthetic colors, to believe it was ever real. But the dresses themselves did not disappear. They lie in wait, sleeping in old trunks in dusty attics, their toxic potential perfectly preserved. And as the 20th century progresses, some of them begin to emerge, making their way from family heirlooms into the sterile, climate-controlled archives of museums. And here, in the quiet, well-ordered world of historical preservation, the ghost of Sheila's green returns. We find ourselves in a modern museum's textile conservation lab. A curator, a young woman in a white lab coat and knitted gloves, is carefully examining a new acquisition. It is a ball gown from the 1862, a stunning creation of green tarlatan, adorned with delicate, artificial flowers. It is, perhaps, your very dress. The curator knows the history. She knows the legends of the arsenic dresses, before the gown can be catalogued or put on display. Its toxicity must be assessed. The process is now far more sophisticated than the Marsh test. She uses a handheld device called an X-ray fluorescent sex RF spectrometer. It looks a bit like a price scanner from a supermarket. She points it at the fabric and pulls a trigger. The device bombards the fabric with X- rays, causing the elements within it to fluoresce, each element emitting a unique energy signature. The screen on the device lights up with a graph, A massive spike appears at the energy level corresponding to arsenic. The ghost in the machine has been found. This dress is now classified as a hazardous subject. It is given a special tag, a warning to all future handlers. It must be stored in its own acid-free box, sealed to prevent any dust from escaping. Anyone who needs to work with it must wear a respirator and full protective gear. It is treated less like a piece of clothing and more like a piece of radioactive waste. This is a real and ongoing challenge for museum professionals. A surprising number of historical artifacts are toxic. Old taxidermy animals from your era were often preserved with arsenic soaps. Felt hats can still contain mercury. Early photographs, derby shoes, were made using a process that involved toxic mercury fumes. A museum collection is not just a treasure trove of beautiful objects. It's a cabinet of historical poisons, a catalogue of the dangerous materials that were once a part of everyday life. The debate among curators and conservators is a fascinating one. How do you balance the need for preservation with the safety of staff and researchers? And how do you display these objects to the public? If you put an arsenic dress on a mannequin in a glass case, do you need to include a warning label? Does explaining the toxicity of the object enhance the visitor's understanding of the past? Or does it detract from the aesthetic appreciation of the garment? It's a complex ethical and practical puzzle. One of the strangest and most poignant discoveries made by modern conservators is that the arsenic pigment actually had an unexpected side effect. It acted as a powerful pesticide. While other fabrics from the era were often damaged or destroyed by moths and other insects, the arsenic dresses frequently survived in pristine condition. The very thing that made them so dangerous to humans made them perfectly pest-proof. They are, in a grimly ironic way, some of the best preserved textiles of the 19th century, protected by their own lethality. So your dress, which you so wisely packed away in a trunk, survives the passage of time. It outlives you. It outlives your children. It sleeps for a century, until it is rediscovered and given a new life, a second existence. As a museum artifact, it can no longer be worn. It can barely be touched, but it can be studied and, from a safe distance, admired. It is no longer a fashion statement, but a historical document. It is a silent, beautiful, and still dangerous witness, a ghost in the museum, whispering its strange and toxic story to a new generation. Standing here, in this quiet, future moment, looking back at the story of your green dress, it's easy to feel a sense of superiority, a kind of chronological snobbery. How could they have been so blind, so obsessed with a color that they were willing to risk their lives for it? But the truth is, the story is not just about a bizarre and distant past. It's about a fundamental, and perhaps timeless, human impulse, the price we are willing to pay to be seen. Your desire for the green dress was never just about liking a color. It was about what that color could do for you. In a society where your options were limited, your appearance was your primary to love communication. It was your resume, your billboard, your voice. The dress was a way to stand out, to compete, to declare your value in the only language that seemed to matter. You weren't just wearing a dress. You were wearing your ambition. This willingness to suffer for beauty is a thread that runs through all of human history. Think of the ancient Egyptians, who lined their eyes with coal made from lead-based galena, or the Roman women who used lead-based powders to whiten their faces, slowly poisoning themselves in the pursuit of a fashionable pallor. In the Renaissance, women used eye drops made from the toxic belladonna plant to dilate their pupils, a practice that caused blurry vision and, over time, blindness, all for the sake of a more alluring gaze. And the tradition continues long after your time. In the early 20th century, the discovery of radium, a new and miraculous element, led to a craze for radioactive cosmetics. Face creams, powders, and even toothpastes were sold with the promise that the glowing element would impart health and vitality. Women would literally paint their faces with radioactive material, believing it was the height of scientific beauty. One of the strangest and most dangerous beauty practices of the era immediately following yours was the tapeworm diet. Advertisements would promise a slim figure without the effort of dieting or exercise. The secret: you would swallow a pill containing a tapeworm egg. The parasite would then live in your intestines, consuming some of the food you ate, thus helping you lose weight. When you reached your desired size, you would take another pill to kill and expel the worm. It was a horrifyingly literal interpretation of the idea of having a secret, hungry helper inside you. The academic debate around this topic is rich and complex. Is the pursuit of beauty a form of cultural oppression, a set of impossible standards imposed upon women? Or is it a form of creative self-expression, a way of taking control of one's own identity? Sociologists, historians, and feminists continue to argue about the balance of power and agency in the world of fashion and beauty. Is it a cage, or is it a canvas? Looking at your own story, it seems to be both. The pressure to be fashionable, to secure a good marriage, was a very real constraint, a gilded cage, but within that cage, your choice of the green dress was an act of agency, a bold and deliberate move in the social game you were forced to play. You were using the tools available to you to shape your own destiny. The tragedy is that one of your most powerful tools turned out to be a poison one. The story of the arsenic green dress is not, in the end, a story about foolish, vain Victorians. It's a story about the complex, and often dangerous, relationship between technology, status, and the human body. It's about how a society can fall in love with a beautiful poison, and the slow, painful process of waking up from that enchantment, and it serves as a quiet, shimmering, and slightly toxic reminder that the things we do to be seen, to be admired, to belong, can sometimes come at a very steep and very hidden price. It's a story that is woven into the very fabric of our desire to be beautiful, a ghost that still haunts the aisles of every cosmetics counter and the pages of every fashion magazine. And so, our story comes full circle. It begins in a world of brown and grey, a city choked with soot and starved for colour. It ends in a world that is saturated with it, a world made possible by the very crisis you lived through. The ghost of your green dress recedes, but its legacy is everywhere, painted on the walls of the future. The aniline dye revolution, which began with mauve and exploded in the wake of the arsenic green scandal, did more than just change fashion. It democratized color. For the first time in history, brilliant, stable, and vibrant colors were available to everyone, not just the wealthy. The working-class woman who could never have afforded an insect-dyed crimson or a rare plant-based blue could now buy a ribbon or a shawl in a dazzling synthetic shade. The world simply became a brighter, more colorful place. This explosion of color fundamentally changed the way people saw the world. Artists like the Impressionists were captivated by these new synthetic pigments. The vibrant purples in Monet's water lilies, the intense blues in Van Gogh's Starry Nights. These were colors that simply hadn't been available to artists of previous generations. The chemical revolution in your wardrobe directly fueled an artistic revolution on the canvas. Of course, the story of color and safety did not end with the banning of arsenic green. The new synthetic dyes brought their own, often unforeseen, problems. Some of the early red dyes were found to be carcinogenic. Workers in the dye factories were exposed to a new cocktail of dangerous chemicals. The story of our relationship with the chemistry of beauty is a long and ongoing one. A constant negotiation between desire and danger, innovation and regulation. One of the last strange echoes of the arsenic green story appeared in the mid-20th century with the rise of day-glow, or fluorescent colors. The incredibly intense, almost vibrating colors of yellow, green, and orange were created using pigments that absorbed ultraviolet light and emitted it as visible light. For a time, there were concerns that some of these pigments, particularly in children's toys, might contain toxic elements. It was a faint, distant echo of your story, a reminder that the quest for ever brighter Ever minus more minus novel colors always carries with it a quiet, attendant risk. Historians who study the history of color argue that its social meaning is constantly in flux. Green, in your time, came to be associated with poison, danger, and death. Before that, in medieval times, it was often associated with nature, fertility, and hope. Later, it would become the color of environmental movements, a symbol of life and health. The ultimate irony: the meaning of a color is not inherent. It is a story we tell ourselves. A story that can be rewritten by a chemist's discovery or a public health crisis. As you look back from this distant shore, you see your younger self, standing in a ballroom, wrapped in a cloud of shimmering, toxic dust. You don't feel pity for her, or scorn. You feel a sense of quiet understanding. She was a product of her time, playing a game with the rules she was given, using the most beautiful weapon she could find. She survived. She learned it. She adapted. The green dress, sleeping in its museum box, is the silent testament to her story, to your story. It is a reminder that beauty can be a trap, that progress can have a price, and that sometimes the most enchanting things in the world are the most dangerous. It is a story of a color that was too beautiful to be safe, and of a world that loved it, suffered for it, and ultimately had to let it go. And in letting it go, it opened the door to a future you could never have imagined, a future painted in a million new, brilliant, and finally, safer shades. And so, our story for tonight comes to a gentle close. The tale of the beautiful, deadly green has been told. Its vibrant, shimmering dust settling now into the quiet corners of your mind. The ballroom has gone quiet. The gas lights have been dimmed, and the rustle of the toilet and rest has faded into a soft and distant memory. You can feel the story beginning to drift away now, like a dream you are already starting to forget. The show, bright green, softens, its edges blurring, becoming a gentle, soothing color of a peaceful, sunlit meadow. The characters are characters. Your younger self, the doctor, the queen, they take a final, silent bound recede into the soft shadows of your sleepy thoughts. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to figure out. You can simply let it all go now. Let the details dissolve. Let the narrative fade away, leaving behind only a feeling of deep and profound quiet. If you are still listening, and that is perfectly all right, your mind may be growing as still and quiet as the museum where that green dress now rests. It is a safe and protected place, a place of deep and effortless calm. There is nothing more to do. There is nowhere else you need to be. You are here, now, in this moment of perfect stillness, drifting gently on the soft, slow currents of the approaching night. Just allow your breath to guide you, with soft, easy rhythm, carrying you ever deeper into a place of wonderful, peaceful slumber. Our journey together tonight ends here, in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.